Hey there, everyone. This is Kevin from the Survivor Super Fun Time Show, and I want to talk a little bit more about the teeny thing that happened this past episode 12 of Survivor 47. We all remember it. At this point, it's been big news. A lot of people have been irrationally angry on the internet about Teeny having a little bit of an outburst, berating Sam, essentially, his character, who he is, hating men. And I thought it was really interesting because I was one of those people that had a strong reaction right away. And I said, why is Teeny being so pissy? And I think Teeny was being very pissy. But I want to talk a little bit more about the context of it all because remember, this channel was made because I don't like when fans are being overly toxic. But I also am giving commentary about the game. So I have to comment on behavior every once in a while. I want to comment on the behavior and saying, yes, thought it was pissy and Teeny was being a little bit of a dick, but I want to give on multiple levels why I think I had a problem with what Teeny said during this episode. Now, first I have to start off and say, part of the reason why part 2 of the episode didn't sit right with me, where Teeny was going off on Sam, is because right away, part 1 didn't sit right with me either, where Teeny was sitting with Genevieve, and Genevieve simply said something like, if Rachel's in the finals with you, you are not a slam dunk vote for me. And Teeny basically took that as a threat. That's the way the edit showed it at the very least. And myself, I'm watching it, I'm like, well, what Genevieve just said is pretty reasonable. Like, maybe you don't like it from a game standpoint, but it sounds like, she was actually kind of leveling with you and being honest. Yes, she was trying to save herself, but apparently that's what Genevieve really thinks based on confessionals. And the fans sure think that Rachel would win, so why not? Like, I'm a fan of Genevieve. So when I see that, I go, okay, well, Teeny, I like you. I love her. So this is not a good start for you to be in such conflict over a small comment that's purely based on strategy and kind of make it personal. Obviously, part 2 is when the reward challenge comes up and Sam doesn't pick Teeny. And Teeny flips out about that. On a minor level, but it is a flip out in comparison. It's like a Liz Wilcox from last year. Is it a huge deal? No. But it doesn't happen very often on Survivor, so it is conversation worthy. And I had a problem with it on a few different levels. Specifically, after the reward challenge was done and Teeny was really excited to raise their hand and talk about why Sam is stupid. First of all, from a strategic standpoint, I mean, would Teeny have actually listened to Sam, like really negotiated with Sam in any way? I don't think that's the case. I mean, based off what we saw happen at the actual sanctuary, it worked out really well for Sam to take Genevieve and Andy. And based on what we heard from Teeny afterward, Teeny apparently has some rooted stuff where they do not like Sam at all. Or they don't like what Sam represents, which I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but that's kind of what Teeny said. So it makes me think that Teeny was never going to work with Sam no matter what. So it would have been a waste. It would have just been feeding Teeny once again because Teeny's eaten a lot throughout Survivor 47. And that's something I don't want to get lost in the mix here. Teeny's eaten as much or more than anyone else who's been in the game. They've had a lot of rewards. So I don't feel too bad about that part. And I don't think they've been starving like Liz Wilcox was in 46, who couldn't eat like anything. So I think there's a bit of a difference to think about it in that viewpoint. Strategically, also, there's a portion where when Teeny says, Sam would have been smart to look at me and think I would have been the one to flip and all this kind of stuff, really putting Teeny in a position by themselves to think about themselves as the best player in the game, or the most important player in the game, rather. So it's interesting to see that because I would think, Teeny's not had some kind of Godfather run in Survivor up to this point. So why would Teeny think that they would be so important that Sam should take them specifically? If it's because they're the most likely to flip, then my third problem with it is, why would Teeny announce to everyone else in the Underdog Alliance that I would have been the most likely one to flip? That's also kind of a ridiculous point to me, which I'm just like, my brain can't wrap around it from a strategic standpoint. And I think it didn't quite make sense what Teeny was saying in that moment strategically and relationship building with their alliance, that it would make sense that they would be chosen. So in sum, at the end of the challenge, I'm like, actually, I think Sam made the right choice. I don't know why you would have even been a major consideration, because I don't think you would have considered Sam. Then on the next level of it, going back to, camp, my issue obviously is that's when Teeny did the bulk of kind of the angry stuff. And again, this is all the base level. They're all out there starving. They have their moments. They have these tiffs. They get hangry. I get it. So I'm not like killing Teeny for this. I still like Teeny. I think Teeny seems like a really nice person. I think they seem like a great soul. I like Teeny still. I don't hate Teeny in any way. If anyone harasses Teeny during this, then you suck and we should fight. However, I think there's a portion where, like, if something noteworthy happens, you can talk about it. Where I had issues with some of the stuff Teeny was going off about was, one, I just didn't understand what Teeny was freaking out about, which tells me that Teeny didn't even know what they were freaking out about. They were like, oh, he's going to come back and say all the right things, and he's going to come back and have like a really nice demeanor about it. And, and like be good looking and tall and this high school quarterback figure that I just don't want around me. And I like, what do you do with that, right? Like, I sit here as a fan, I'm like, well, what does Sam do about most of those things? Would you rather him come back and be mean about it? Do you want him to not look exactly how he looks, or what? Like, I don't know what to do with that. And especially the part where Teeny said, am I just a man hater to my core? As a man, I feel really weird about that when I hear it. I can't just brush it off super easy. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's not going to linger forever. But I think it's fair if some people are like, that's weird that you can just say that and you should just be totally absolved and there should be zero issues, right? So again, not a huge deal, but I think it's fair to say that's probably why some people watched this episode and left like, yeah, the Teeny doesn't look as appealing as they once did. And this next thing I'm going to say is the most important thing I'm going to say in this entire video. This episode was edited very specifically so that we, including myself, saw Teeny in this light. We saw exactly what we needed to. Now, Sam could have had a tirade similar to this. Like, he could have absolutely had an episode where he was freaking out about, I don't know, Annika bossing him around or something like that, and, you know, calling her names or something like that. It's very possible. The edit only shows us what we see. I don't know if Sam and Teeny have had a really poor relationship. I don't know if Sam's been mean to Teeny, and that is what has helped propel this. I really don't know. However, based on what we saw, what the editors want us to see, they wanted us to think of Teeny as lesser than they did previously. And that sucks because Teeny's someone that I grew to like quite a bit. But after this, I'm like, okay, well, you had a beef with probably my two favorite players this season in Genevieve and Sam. I have a hard time rooting for you. And yeah, I'm going to call you out a little bit on this episode. I'm going to say, yeah, you had a few moments where you were kind of a dick. And that's it. That's fine. That's not a big deal. But that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the episode. And I can't wait to see episode 13. We're going to see who the winner is in only 2 short weeks. And it's going to be super exciting. Hope you have an amazing day, everyone. You take care.